The nasty smell hit the ambassadors like a wet slap in the face. It was so strong and awful, they started gagging before they even got near the throne room. Think of the worst smell you've ever come across, like a dead animal rotting in the sun mixed with rotten eggs and a blocked toilet. That's what King James I of England smelled like, and that was him on a good day. This is the same guy who gave us the King James Bible that millions still read today. But the truth? He hadn't had a real bath in years. His tongue was too big for his mouth, so he was always drooling, and his clothes covered in lice. People at court said you could actually see the little bugs jumping around like they were having a party. And the craziest part? He wasn't even the worst one. Things are about to get a whole lot nastier. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it melts people's brains. In this episode, we're counting down 11 royal rulers with habits so bizarre, so disgusting, and so completely insane. You'll be glad you're not wearing a crown. Let's ease into the madness with number 11, Charles VI of France. And believe it or not, he's actually one of the less crazy ones on this list. Charles had something called glass delusions. He truly believed his entire body was made of glass. If someone touched him, he thought he'd shatter into tiny pieces like a wine glass dropped on stone. This wasn't just a passing thought, it was his full-time reality. He walked carefully, step by step, like every movement might crack him. He had special iron rods sewn into his clothes to protect him from breaking, and no one, absolutely no one, was allowed to touch him. He even sat down in slow motion, terrified his bones might splinter. And get this, sometimes he'd forget he was even king. A servant would knock and say, "Your Majesty, the council is waiting," and Charles would blink in confusion. "Council? What council? Who am I?" "You're the king, sire." "Oh, right." And here's the really strange part. This glass madness wasn't just Charles. Back in the Middle Ages, several nobles believed this kind of thing. They called it scholar's melancholy. People thought that reading too much, studying too hard, or using your brain too much could literally break your mind. And for some poor souls, it did. It's like the medieval version of people today thinking Wi-Fi gives them headaches, or that their microwave is spying on them. Same vibe, different century. Number 10. Peter III of Russia. If you thought dolls were just for kids, think again. Peter was the emperor of all Russia, but mentally he was living in a playroom. He didn't just collect dolls, he played with them, gave them names, voices, personalities. He made up little wars and acted them out like a 5-year-old with action figures. But here's where it gets really uncomfortable. He didn't do this privately in his room. He forced his wife, yes, Catherine the Great, and all the royal courtiers to join in, every night, until 2 or 3 in the morning. Imagine being a future legendary empress and you're stuck making squeaky voices for toy soldiers at bedtime. And people say Catherine had him killed. Well, the official story says he died of hemorrhoidal colic, basically an intense case of butt pain. But let's be honest, if your husband is the most powerful man in Russia and he makes you play dolls every night, and then suddenly dies from extreme butt problems, that's not a coincidence. That's a crime of exhaustion. But wait, there's more. Peter had a full-blown obsession with Prussia. He wore Prussian uniforms, refused to speak Russian, and once held a military trial for a rat. Yes, a rat. Why? The rat chewed up his toy soldiers. So Peter set up a full court-martial, judged the rat for treason, and then let it go because he said it had chewed with proper Prussian discipline. You can't make this up. This is what power does to people. Number 9. Farouk of Egypt. This guy had money, power, palaces, cars, and more than 1,000 fancy suits. And yet, he spent his free time pickpocketing people. That's right. King Farouk was a kleptomaniac, a royal thief. Winston Churchill once met him and walked away without his watch. Farouk had swiped it right off him. Guests at state dinners would leave missing rings, medals, wallets. He'd even practice sleight of hand just for fun. He called it the hand of the thief. Imagine being so rich that you steal for entertainment. And he was obsessed with the color red. He had hundreds of red cars. He made a rule that no one else in Egypt was allowed to own a red car, only him. If he saw one on the street, he'd have it confiscated. Once he saw a red car passing him and shot out its tires. Turned out it belonged to a foreign diplomat. Oops. He also had the world's biggest adult film collection, over 10,000 items. Claimed it was educational. Sure, Farouk. And he got huge, so large that restaurants had to saw the arms off chairs just so he could sit. At meals, he'd order every single dish on the menu and then complain that he was still hungry. The man had everything and wanted more, even if it was in your pocket. Number 8. King Martin of Aragon, nicknamed Martin the Humane, which is hilarious because he died the dumbest death ever. One day in 1410, after devouring a full goose all by himself, he sat down bloated and uncomfortable. His jester came in to cheer him up with a joke. A deer was hanging by its tail from a tree because it stole some figs. That's it. That's the whole joke. Not even funny. But Martin found it hilarious. He laughed and laughed and laughed for 3 hours. He laughed so hard he couldn't breathe, turned purple, fell off his chair, and died. Death by fig joke. Imagine being the jester. Your job is to make the king laugh, and you succeed too well. Your joke literally ends the monarchy. Number 7. Christian VII of Denmark. This guy was a walking disaster. He was completely unfit to rule, and honestly probably needed medical help. But instead, he got a crown. He had a very private obsession with, well, let's just say he did it so much. His doctors gave him a special chair to prevent injury. You can guess the rest, but that's just the start. He'd randomly slap people, guests, politicians, anyone nearby. At peace talks, slap. At royal weddings, slap. At dinner, slap. He sprinted through the palace at night, breaking furniture, tearing down art, and yelling nonsense. He once declared his dog a government minister and expected people to listen to it. He also loved leapfrog, and not with children, no. He made ambassadors play leapfrog with him in full court dress. You came to discuss international trade and ended up hopping through the throne room like a schoolboy. Number 6. Caligula, Emperor of Rome. This man was born into power and immediately lost his mind. Start with his horse Incitatus. Caligula gave him marble stables, gold feed bowls, purple robes, and servants. He invited the horse to dinner parties, poured it wine, talked to it about politics, and yes, he planned to make it a Roman senator. He also declared himself a living god. He'd dress up as Jupiter one day, Venus the next, and order temples to hold rituals just for him. One day, just to prove a fortune teller wrong, he built a 3-mile-long floating bridge across a bay, just so he could ride across it in stolen armor. That's not leadership, that's pure theatrical madness. Number 5. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, known as the Swan King. And yes, it's as strange as it sounds. He was obsessed with fairy tales and opera, built castles that looked like Disney fantasies. One of them inspired the actual Disney castle. He didn't just build them, he lived in them like a storybook prince. He wore medieval robes, floated in shell-shaped boats under man-made waterfalls, and rode sleighs in summer. He was completely nocturnal, slept during the day, and held morning meetings at midnight. His strangest habit? Throwing dinner parties for dead royals. He had servants set the table, pour wine, and serve food for guests who weren't there. Louis XIV, Marie Antoinette, and he spoke to them like they were real. Haunted dinners, every night. Number 4. Ibrahim the Mad, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. After 22 years locked in isolation, Ibrahim finally got power and completely lost control. He was obsessed with fur, covered walls, floors, even ceilings with it. Wrapped himself in fur blankets even during the hot Istanbul summer. But it gets darker. He had an obsession with large women. He demanded the fattest woman in the empire be brought to him. They found Shekapare, a 330-pound woman. He made her a royal favorite and appointed her governor of Damascus. Worse, he became paranoid that his wives were cheating on him. So one night, he had 280 women from his harem drowned in the sea. Only one survived to tell the story. Number 3. Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of China. The man who unified China also poisoned himself trying to live forever. He swallowed mercury pills daily, even bathed in mercury, thinking it would give him eternal life. Spoiler, it didn't. He built 270 palaces, all connected by secret tunnels, so assassins could never find him. He was terrified of books and scholars, so he burned almost every book in the empire and buried 460 scholars alive for questioning his rule. When he finally died, his officials covered it up. They loaded his rotting body into a wagon and surrounded it with barrels of dead fish, just to hide the smell. They travelled for weeks, pretending he was still alive. Number 2. Adolf Fredrik, King of Sweden, the king who ate himself to death. His final meal was a disaster. Lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, champagne, and 14 cream buns. 14. He stood up from the table, collapsed, and died. That's his legacy. Not wars, not policies, just the king who couldn't stop eating. And number 1. Henry VIII of England. Everyone knows the 6 wives, but few talk about what a nightmare his body became. By the end of his life, Henry was 400 pounds, covered in sores, and had a wound on his leg that oozed pus every day. He was too big to walk, too wide to fit through doorways, and had to be hoisted onto the toilet with ropes. He had type 2 diabetes, his urine smelled sweet, and flies constantly buzzed around him. He refused to bathe, yet insisted on fancy portraits that made him look slim and strong. When he died, his corpse exploded from the gases inside. His coffin burst open, and dogs licked up the fluids leaking onto the palace floor. A king who went out with a bang. So what's the takeaway? Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it scrambles people. And after hearing all that, boring tie-wearing politicians sound kinda nice, don't they?